You won't believe the story I'm about to tell you, it still gives me chills when I think about it. Back when I was just a young man hungry for wisdom, I'd heard whispers about this brilliant philosopher, a legendary thinker who had left society behind to live deep in a wild, tangled forest. They said he was the real deal, a master of knowledge, untouched by the noise of the world. So, without knowing exactly what I was getting myself into, I packed a bag and started walking. And let me tell you, this wasn't some stroll through a park. I trudged through thick jungle, pushed past thorns that tore at my skin, and kept going even when I heard wild animals growling in the shadows. Days passed before I finally stumbled upon a small wooden hut perched beside a calm river. There, surrounded by towering trees and silence, lived the sage. He wasn't just wise, he had this glow about him, this presence that made you feel like you were in the company of something bigger than life. He welcomed me with a warm smile, asked nothing of me but respect and sincerity, and allowed me to stay. From that moment on, I became his student, his disciple. I helped with chores, fetched water, served him and his wife, and soaked up every bit of knowledge he was willing to share. Now, here's where things took a turn you won't expect. Though the sage was old in years, his energy was still sharp, almost youthful. One day, something shocking happened. His wife, who had never been pregnant before, was expecting a child. Yes, for the first time in her life, she was going to be a mother, and the old sage was about to become a father. 8 months into her pregnancy, the sage decided to make a journey to the sacred source of the river that flowed beside his home. He said it was something he had to do alone, something spiritual. Since his wife couldn't travel, he placed her in the care of me, his devoted student, and a kind neighbor, another sage's wife. Everything seemed calm at first, but then, not long after he left, his wife went into labor. The neighbor stayed inside the hut to help with the delivery, while I stood outside, pacing nervously and whispering every prayer I could think of. I wanted nothing more than for the baby to arrive safely, for the mother and child to survive what I knew was a dangerous moment. Here's where things got surreal. In our tradition, it's believed that the moment a child is born, the Creator himself, Brahma, arrives, invisible to most, to write the newborn's fate on their forehead. It's not a metaphor, it's an ancient belief we take very seriously. He appears, unseen, and with a divine stylus, records the destiny the baby must live out, based on the deeds of their past life. But that day, I saw him. Not metaphorically, not in a dream. I saw someone step right into the cottage while the sage's wife was mid-labor, and it wasn't just someone, there was something unearthly about him, his glow, his grace, the way the world seemed to quiet in his presence. Without even thinking, I snapped, "Stop right there." The figure froze. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had just yelled at a god. No mortal had ever done that before, but I wasn't thinking about protocol, I was thinking about my master's wife, about protecting her. The man turned and looked at me, his face filled with shock. I said, "Who do you think you are, barging in like this? My guru's wife is giving birth, and you're just walking in without a word." The man raised a hand and calmly said, "I am Brahma. I swear to you, I felt the earth tilt beneath me. The Creator himself, right there in front of me." Instantly, I realized my mistake. I bowed low, tied my upper cloth around my waist as a sign of respect, and prostrated myself before him. I apologized with every ounce of sincerity I had, my voice shaking. But Brahma wasn't angry, he was in a hurry. "I have very little time," he said, "the child is nearly here, and I must do what I was born to do." Even then, I couldn't help myself. I said, "If you truly must go in, at least promise me this, on your way out, tell me what fate you've written for the child." He paused for a moment, then nodded, "All right, but be warned, this is sacred knowledge, if you tell another soul, your head will shatter into 1,000 pieces." And just like that, he vanished into the cottage. Moments passed, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then Brahma stepped back out, silent and composed. I rushed to him, "Please, tell me, what did your stylus write?" He looked me in the eye and said, "The child is a boy, his life will be one of struggle, all he will own will be a single buffalo and a sack of rice, that will be his destiny." I stared at him in disbelief, "But how? This child is the son of a great sage. Surely he's meant for more than that." Brahma shook his head with quiet finality. I do not choose these things, what I write is determined by the child's deeds in a past life, that is the law, and remember, speak of this to no one, or you will pay dearly. With those final words, Brahma disappeared, leaving me alone with 1,000 questions and a heavy heart. My guru returned not long after, thrilled to see his wife healthy and his new baby safe in her arms. I smiled and bowed and acted as if nothing had happened, but inside, I was wrecked. How could someone so innocent, so full of potential, already be doomed to a life of poverty? Still, I kept my promise, I said nothing. And even though the pain of that secret stayed with me, I threw myself back into study. Life in that little hut by the river went on, but deep down, I knew something had changed forever. What happens to that child, and what I eventually do with Brahma's secret, well, you won't believe what comes next. 3 more years passed. I had buried myself in learning, growing wiser under my master's steady hand. Just when I thought we'd settled into peace, the old sage once again announced his pilgrimage, back to the sacred source of the Tungabhadra river. His wife, pregnant again, was to remain behind. Just like before, she was placed in my care, alongside a trusted woman companion, and just like before. I waited outside the small cottage while she went into labor, praying with everything I had that both mother and child would be safe. And then, it happened. That strange ripple in the air, that sudden stillness, I knew what it meant. Brahma was coming. Sure enough, just like the last time, the invisible god approached. Though I alone could see him, I stepped in his path without hesitation. Again, I begged him, pleaded, tell me what you will write on this child's forehead. Pressed for time, Brahma gave me the same warning. You remember the last time, you speak of this, and your head will split into 1,000 pieces. I remember, I said, my voice shaking. He nodded. This one is a girl, and her fate is worse. I couldn't breathe. She will earn her living selling her body, Brahma said. She is fated to become a prostitute. Every night, she will give herself away. And just like that, he vanished. I stood there, stunned, the daughter of a holy man, a sage's child, destined to be sold, night after night, for survival. I was crushed by it, angry, broken. I turned the words over in my mind for days, weeks, trying to make sense of it. But in the end, I told myself the same thing I always did: fate governs all. My master returned, full of joy. The baby girl was healthy, the family blossomed around her. I stayed with them another 2 years. I watched that little boy grow, the one who'd one day live off a single buffalo and a sack of rice, and I watched the baby girl giggle and crawl, blissfully unaware of the path carved into her future. And then, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked for my master's permission to go on a pilgrimage of my own, to the Himalayas, the roof of the world. I needed answers, I needed wisdom deeper than what I already had. The pain of knowing what awaited those children, my master's legacy, was too much to bear in silence. I traveled for 20 years. I wandered, I studied, I sat at the feet of sages, I watched the world, I watched people break under the weight of fate, and others rise, inexplicably, above it. I tried to understand. And when I was finally ready, I came home. Back to the riverside hut where it all began. But everything was different. My master was gone, his wife, too. All that remained of them was memory and silence. With a heavy heart, I walked to the nearby town. I asked around, looked for the children. And then, I saw him. A man, thin and sun-worn, leading a single buffalo down the road. Something in me just knew, that was him, my master's son, the baby I had once prayed over, the one Brahma said would live on buffalo milk and a sack of rice. He led me to a crumbling little hut. Inside, a wife, 2 skinny children, and yes, a lone sack of rice. Just like Brahma said, that was it, that was all they had. Each day, they scraped out a little grain, cooked it over a fire, and prayed it would last, and when it didn't, the man would take his buffalo to the market and beg for enough money to buy just one more sack. That was their life, barely surviving. I watched for a while, heart aching, then I approached him. "Do you know who I am?" I asked, calling him by his name. He blinked, confused. "How do you know my name?" "I was your father's disciple," I said, I was there when you were born, I watched over your family when he was away. He stared at me like I was a ghost from the past. Please, I said, you must listen to what I tell you. Tomorrow morning, sell the buffalo, sell the rice, everything, for whatever price you can get, use the money to buy food, a feast for your wife and children, let them eat till their bellies are full, finish every last grain before night falls, then take what's left and give to the poor, and to the wisest Brahmins in town. Trust me, you will not regret it. He looked at me like I was mad. Sell it all. Are you out of your mind? He snapped. What will I feed them with the next day? Dust? I tried to reason with him, to beg him, I'm not just any Brahmin, I was your father's chosen disciple, please, just trust me. But he scoffed. You Brahmins, he muttered, bitter, you always tell us to give everything away, but you're never the one starving, are you? And with that, he turned his back. And my heart shattered again. Because he didn't know what I knew. He didn't know the curse written across his forehead before he ever took his first breath. And I couldn't tell him. Because if I did, my head would explode into 1,000 shards. And so I stood there, silent, staring at a man imprisoned by destiny. And I wondered, would he ever be free? She blinked in surprise. I'm sure she expected some drunk villager or a traveling trader, not a man in saffron robes. I looked at her and felt a sharp ache in my chest. She was young, beautiful, and unmistakably haunted. The way she leaned against the doorframe told me she was tired of the world, tired of men, tired of herself. I said gently, you don't know me, but I knew your father, I was his disciple many years ago. She didn't say a word, just stepped aside and let me in. There was a strange kind of resignation in her, like she was too used to strange men walking through her door to question why anymore. I sat on the only mat in the room and looked around. It was clean but sparse, the air smelled of incense trying too hard to cover other smells. I turned to her and said, Child, I've come not as a customer but as your father's student. I promised him long ago to look after you and your brother. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious. My brother? I haven't heard from him in years, not since. She trailed off, and I could tell it was too painful to finish. I nodded slowly. He's doing well now, he's living a better life, feeding the poor every day. He remembers you, with pain. Her face stiffened. Pain. He should feel shame. He cast me out when I needed him the most. I was 16 when hunger drove me to this. He closed the door in my face. I was dirty, in his eyes. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I let the silence stretch. I could feel how deep her wounds ran, but I also knew what Brahma had written on her forehead, and I wasn't here to argue with fate, I was here to challenge it. I said, would you be willing to do one thing for me, just once? Something that requires trust. She gave a dry laugh. Trust? That's a luxury people like me can't afford, but, fine, say what you have to say. Tonight, I said, don't take in any customers, instead, cook the best meal you can, feed yourself first, then feed any poor person you can find, spend everything you have doing this, leave nothing for tomorrow, not a coin, not a grain of rice, do you understand? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You want me to starve tomorrow? I want you to trust me, just this once, tomorrow morning, see what happens. She stared at me, lips pressed into a thin line, weighing her options like she'd done 100 times in darker moments. Finally, she nodded. Fine, she said, almost defiantly, one night, but if I starve tomorrow, I'll curse your name with my last breath. You won't, I said, rising to leave. Fate can be rewritten, but only by the brave. That night, she did as I asked. She used the little money she had and made a simple but warm meal. For the first time in years, she didn't put on makeup or perfume, she didn't light her oil lamp for customers. Instead, she lit one for peace. She sat on the ground and ate in silence, tears streaming down her face. When she was done, she stepped outside and fed a hungry beggar boy who'd been hanging around the street. The boy looked at her like she was a queen. She hadn't seen a look like that in years. She went to sleep on an empty stomach and an empty purse, but for the first time in her life, with a full heart. The next morning, she woke up early. And she thought, well, that was a lovely little act of madness, now what? She stood, stretched, and moved toward the corner where she kept her coins, knowing there was nothing there. But then she froze. In the center of the room, where she had swept just hours before, there sat a beautiful brass pot filled to the brim with rice. Next to it, neatly folded, was a piece of cloth, inside it, a handful of silver coins. She gasped, looked around. "Is this a trick?" she whispered, but she was alone. That day, she did it again, used everything she had to cook, to feed herself, to feed others, no customers, no compromise, just trust. And the next morning, the brass pot and silver coins returned. It kept happening. A week passed, then 2. And with each passing day, she felt lighter, like her chains, those invisible ones that kept her tied to shame and survival, were loosening. Then one day, I returned. She ran to the door when she heard my knock. This time, her eyes weren't wary, they were searching, glowing with something I hadn't seen before. "It's happening, just like you said," she whispered. "Every morning, there it is, food, coins, I don't understand it." I smiled. "You don't need to understand it, you only need to keep walking this path, give freely, keep nothing, trust the good you do to carry you." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wasn't sad, not anymore. Something had shifted. She hugged me tightly, something she probably hadn't done in years, and whispered, "Thank you." As I walked away from her house that evening, I looked up at the stars. 2 children, born under the shadow of fate. One destined to be a beggar, the other, a prostitute. But here's the thing no one tells you, even Brahma's pen can be challenged. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe that destiny isn't carved in stone, it's shaped by sacrifice, by courage, by love. And if you're wondering what happened next, you'll want to stick around for part 4, you won't believe where this story goes. I knocked softly on her door. It was late, and the lamps inside had dimmed. The moment she opened the door and saw me, she blinked in confusion. Her eyes had seen thousands of faces, but not mine, not since we were children. "Do you know me?" I asked gently. She shook her head. So I told her I was her father's disciple, that I'd held her hand when she toddled barefoot in the ashram gardens, that I had watched her laugh, radiant as the morning sun, when she was just a little girl. The moment the truth sank in, her whole body shook with sobs. She collapsed at my feet, clutching the hem of my robe, unable to lift her head. "My father was a great man," she wept, "and I am this, a shame, a stain on his name. Poverty did this to me." I knelt down and lifted her chin. "Daughter, it is not shameful to fall, but it is, perhaps, tragic never to try and rise again." She wiped her tears, and I gave her one instruction: "Tonight, you will close your door to all. If anyone comes, tell them you will open only for one who brings you a full measure of flawless pearls. Say no more, let that be your price. I will speak with you again at dawn." She hesitated. Of course she did. She'd seen too much of life to believe in fairy tales, but disgusted with the path she walked and desperate for something, anything, to lift her out of it, she agreed. So she closed her door. Men came, knocked, whispered, bargained, and to each one, through the locked door, she said the same thing: a full measure of pearls, or nothing. Some laughed, some cursed, all left. The night stretched thin and cold. Her doubts grew thicker than the walls around her, but as fate would have it, no, as prophecy demanded, in the final watch of night, just before dawn, a man arrived. He was no ordinary man. He looked like a god carved from moonlight, and he came bearing a gleaming brass measure, filled to the brim with pearls that shimmered like stars drowned in milk. He stayed with her. And when morning came, he vanished. She ran to me, eyes wide and trembling. He came, I don't know how, I don't know who he was, but he came. I smiled, yes, and from this day forward, he is your husband. You will never know his name, but you will know his touch, and the scent of the divine that trails behind him. From now on, no other man may enter your life. She nodded, awestruck. Each morning, sell the pearls he leaves, feed the poor, feed the hungry, keep nothing, save nothing. The day you hold back, your husband will vanish, and you will return to the shadows. She vowed it, and for weeks, months, she kept her promise. her door never opened for anyone else, her home became a temple, her hands, once stained with the coins of sin, now ladled rice into the bowls of the starving. I watched from beneath a tree nearby. I had done what I set out to do, my master's son and daughter were no longer broken, they had turned fate's script on its head. At last, I decided to leave. I woke early the day of my departure, too early. I mistook the cawing of a crow for the call of dawn and started walking before the world had fully woken. In the pale moonlight, I met a strange figure, tall, radiant, yet visibly exhausted, walking through the forest. He had a buffalo on a rope, a sack of rice balanced on his head, and a bag of pearls slung over his shoulder. I stopped him. "Who are you, sir, wandering in the woods with such a burden?" At that, the man sighed, dropped the sack of rice, and wiped his brow. "My head is bald from carrying this rice every night. I lead this buffalo to that stubborn coolie's shed, then I run across to his sister's house dressed as a lover, delivering pearls like some divine postman. Why? Because the iron pen I used to write their fates refuses to let me rest. I am Brahma, the creator, and yet here I am, cursed by a clever holy man to fulfill their destinies by hand." He looked at me, tears in his eyes. "Please, sir, let me go, relieve me of this task. When will you free me from what you have rewritten?" I smiled and said, "Only when you grant them happiness, not from miracles, but from the life they've now earned. Let them live like others. No nightly buffalo, no sacks of rice falling from the sky, no pearl-bearing gods. Let them earn and lose and love like ordinary people, without your divine interference. That is what they deserve now." He stared at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. And as I watched, the pearls dissolved into dew, the buffalo into mist, the rice into dust on the breeze. Brahma disappeared, relieved of his duties, his face finally peaceful. I returned to the coolie's house. The buffalo shed was empty, yet he laughed as he walked in from the fields with a plow in hand. "Ah, holy man. I found a job. Paid in coin, not miracles. I earned today's meal with my own back." And his sister? She was sitting outside her home, stringing garlands for a local temple. A widow took me in. She said with a smile, "We share what little we have, no pearls anymore, but peace." I blessed them both and turned to go. But just as I reached the edge of the forest, I felt a shadow beside me, a quiet presence. I turned, and saw my master. Yes, the great sage himself. He looked exactly as I remembered him, only with a strange glow around him. "Well done," he said, "you rewrote the stars without lifting a pen." "I tried," I replied. Then he leaned in close and whispered something that chilled my bones. "You think you outwitted fate, but fate wanted you to try. You see, disciple, your fate was to change theirs, even your cleverness was part of the plan." And then he vanished. So in the end, I had not outwitted Brahma, not really. Fate had simply used me to outwit itself.